Let's check our posture, making sure our spine is straight, our head is aligned. Finding a posture where we can be stable and relaxed. Let's take 3 deep breaths. Let's set our motivation, making this motivation meaningful and altruistic. Let's spend a few minutes practicing calm abiding meditation. Now let's reflect with experiences of our own lives. Let's reflect on anger and patience. Anger or hostility can arise towards people, objects, or our own suffering. And it arises due to exaggerating the negative qualities of a person, object, or situation. Or by superimposing negative qualities that aren't there. Anger wants to harm what we perceive as the source of our unhappiness. We're referring here to anger and hostility as a generic term that includes being irritated, annoyed, critical, judgmental, self-righteous, belligerent, and hostile. So by reflecting on your own experiences, examine if anger is destructive or useful. Are you happy when you're angry? Do you see a pattern in the type of situations in which you become angry, or the people with whom you get angry? What effect does this pattern have in your life? How do you feel when you're angry? Underneath the anger, is there hurt, fear, sadness? Anger often makes us feel powerful when inside we feel powerless. Getting in touch with the feeling under our anger can help us understand it better. Do you communicate with others effectively when you're angry? Do you aggressively lash out at them? Or do you withdraw and not speak? What is the effect of your actions on others? Does your anger bring about the happiness that you desire? Later, when you're calm, how do you feel about what you said and did when you were angry? Is there shame, guilt, or loss of self-esteem? How do you appear in others' eyes when you're angry? Does anger promote mutual respect, harmony, and friendship. Recognize that anger and resentment destroy your own and others' happiness. And determine to observe when it arises in you and to apply the Dharma antidotes to subdue it. An antidote to anger is the cultivation of patience. This is the ability to remain undisturbed in the face of harm or suffering. But being patient does not mean being passive. Rather, it gives us the clarity of mind necessary to act or not to act. Bring examples of your life and practice looking at the situations from new perspectives. Remember a time when you got angry because a person criticized you. Whether or not what the other person says is true, there is no reason to get angry when we're criticized. If what the other person says is true, it is like being told that you have a nose. Both the other person and you know this is true. So there is no reason to be angry about it. You should simply acknowledge your mistake. On the other hand, if someone blames you for something you didn't do, there is no reason to be angry at something that is untrue. When you're angry, ask yourself, can I do something about it? If you can, anger is out of place because you can improve the situation. And if you can't, anger is useless because nothing can be done. Examine how you got involved in a situation where anger was detonated in your mind. What actions did you do to prompt the disagreement? Recognize that unpleasant situations are due to our having harmed others earlier in this life or in previous lives. But we can learn from our past mistakes and resolve to act differently in the future. Think of this situation as an opportunity to practice patience. Sometimes people point out our mistakes so we can correct them and improve. And we can practice patience. That can help us in our spiritual development. In these ways, the enemy is like a friend that is helping us make progress on our path. So imagine giving the pain to your selfish attitude by recognizing that is the source of our problems. And recognize that it is the other person's unhappiness and confusion that makes the person harm you. And since you know what is it like to be unhappy, you can empathize and have compassion for the other person. So visualize yourself next time you find a difficult situation or a similar situation. Remembering to Practice patience. Kindness, compassion. Visualize yourself doing it. Now dissolve the visualization and let all the emotions settle. Come to rest in the present. With that aspiration of keep cultivating the habit of patience. Just rest for a moment. Let's finish dedicating this practice so that we can continue developing the far-reaching attitude of patience, reducing anger, aversion, freeing ourselves from suffering, and helping others free themselves too. So this is another of the far-reaching attitudes, or the 6 perfections, the 6 paramitas patience, but it's very related with this affliction. It's the opposite of this affliction of anger or aversion, rejection. And just as we saw yesterday, that attachment, the affliction of attachment, is counteracted with generosity. Anger, we can counteract it or apply the antidote of patience. If we're patient, we get less angry, or we're not angry when we're being patient. So sometimes we think being patient is like to repress the anger and containing it. In a way, it can be helpful not to speak or make impulsive decisions when you are experiencing anger, and that can be a form of patience, but also you have to work with that anger that you perceive. Maybe it's not manifesting out, but it's there. So reflecting on the causes that gave rise to that anger, understanding and asking these questions: can I do something about it? Is it true what they are saying, or what they are pointing out, or what I'm getting angry about? Is it true, or there's no reason to be angry because they're saying something that doesn't make sense, or I know it's not true? And many times that sense of self gets angry or upset just by receiving any kind of comment or criticism, or even a look, or sometimes we get so habituated to be angry that even a little thing can trigger that feeling of anger. Maybe it's a word or the tone of voice of somebody or a sense of discomfort, physical discomfort, that can trigger anger. So it's important to know our triggers, what triggers us, so that we are prepared next time we encounter one of these triggers and know how to react appropriately. Now, this doesn't mean that you can't put limits if you're practicing patience, because it's true that sometimes you encounter a person that is also dominated by a mental affliction and is attacking you or is acting in a very unethical way, and you can put limits or stop that behavior, if you can, from harming you and others. But at the same time, you don't need to be angry to do that, because anger in itself is not helping. It's not bringing happiness to yourself or others. When you are feeling anger, you're not feeling happy at the same moment, right? So you can say no, or put a limit, or tell a person you're acting in a way that is unethical, and you can say it very firmly, but not feeling anger, not experiencing the emotion of anger. So learning to liberate that anger in a way that is not harmful, like throwing things or harming or getting totally controlled by the anger, that you act irrationally or without caring for others, right? And sometimes when you put limits, the other person can react with anger. And that might trigger our anger back, right? Because if they insult us or criticize us or attack us, then we immediately feel the need to fight back. Or sometimes withdraw and feel very bad, but kind of holding it too much that you harm yourself. You get ill or other things if you don't fight back, right? But it's the same thing, just in another manifestation. So in those moments when we are being attacked, doing a meditation is very helpful, like start doing Tonglen or wishing them that they are free of that mental affliction, or say, I don't want to talk right now. I need space. I'm gonna go for a walk, or I have said all that I needed to say. I'm not gonna start repeating and fighting. I'm just gonna take time off. And then we talk later when we calm down, like searching for different strategies, right? This can be difficult. This can be difficult because when the other person is angry too, they're not going to understand as easy that you want to make that, to take that space to think and to calm down. But we should try to do this, and we can also talk with the persons that we are close to beforehand and say, let's agree that when we get angry about something or disagree about something, if we get very tense or start treating each other in a bad way, let's take a break. And so if you have an agreement, that can also help that the other person can understand that in the middle of the emotional episode you say, I need to take space, I need to take a break, I'm going for a walk, we discuss this later, right? So there's different strategies and different antidotes. But if we start cultivating patience for little things, like we feel a discomfort or we don't like the food, or we don't like the noise, and it's not something too big that is detonating a lot of anger, we can practice patience and say, there's a little opportunity to practice patience. I'm going to be present with it. And I'm going to, if there's some anger, I'm going to see how it arises and pass, instead of making a big drama and complaining that, I don't know, the noise of the neighbor or the food or anything, right? So we can start practicing little by little. And we know people that also have trained to the extreme. I mean, most of us are in the middle, where we get angry about certain things that maybe for others are silly or not very important, but for you are important. For you, because of your story, detonates anger. But we also know people that have meditated on anger so much that everything makes them, like they're constantly angry all the time. But this is because of habituation. We get habituated to be angry or to be in a peaceful mental state. We can create a habit out of our mental states. So we want to cultivate the habit of being patient and tolerant, right? So we have to think also, well, that's another strategy, to think when you see a person that is angry and acting in harmful ways, in order to not get angry with the person, you think this person is being dominated by the mental affliction of anger. And it can happen to me because I don't control when I'm going to get angry. It just arises, anger. If we could control it, we could decide I'm never going to get angry ever again. But we can't. It just comes by surprise. So we understand that the other person is also being dominated by anger in that moment. And we can redirect our anger towards anger itself and say, this is a mental affliction that we need to eradicate from both, from everyone. But I don't get angry with the person because the person in that moment is being dominated by a mental affliction. So it's like when you have a relative that they have dementia or some kind of a mental problem, and they do crazy things, and they scream or insult or try to fight, but we know it's because they have an illness. So we don't get angry with them. We're patient with them, and we try to help them. In that way, we can see other people that are manifesting anger, and ourselves too. Forgive ourselves if we were dominated by anger. Of course, if we did behaviors that were very harmful, we can go and ask for forgiveness and try to fix the situation and purify the karma. But also forgive ourselves and not let anger keep dominating you. Like if you see it's there, meditate, observe it, be present with it until it passes. Because if we keep feeding it with more thoughts, in that moment, what happens is that somehow our mind can only access memories that reinforce that emotion. So we start remembering all the negative experiences we had with that person and saying, yeah, you always do this. You did this 10 years ago. And we cannot access the memories of positive experiences too. So it's like we're reinforcing that anger. But if we let it arise and pass and breathe and calm down, then we can remember and put into the balance that it's not always been all negative, all bad, as we are over-exaggerating the negative qualities of the situation or the person or the circumstance or even ourselves, right? We can be angry at ourselves. So we do the same. And so in that moment, if we meditate and we let it dissipate, we're training also our minds to not being totally caught up by anger. Because if we start feeding it with more thoughts and yeah, I should be angry because this happened and this happened before and this happened before, and we keep thinking about it, then we start, that anger can lead us to certain negative behaviors, like wanting to do something, like taking revenge, or calling the person and insult them, or going and fight with them, or something aggressive, right? So, yes, it's true that sometimes we need to say things and put limits, but not keep feeding that anger. You try to stop those behaviors from being continuously arising and re-triggering that emotion, and then making a habit out of it, because then we're in the cycle again and again and again, right? So we need to cultivate the perfection of generosity and now the perfection of patience, and these are the practices of the Bodhisattva, right? If we want to be free of suffering, we need to cultivate this. And there might be other ways you find there are skillful means that help you. Use them. Canalize that into art, or go running, or do something with that energy, but not harming. Okay? No harming yourself, no harming others. Yes?
If you don't mind, leaving anger aside for a moment.
Yeah.
Because shamatha comes.
Yeah.
So I have a question about shamatha. When dwelling in a space between thoughts, what comes up for me at times is this insecurity in the silence because of the absence of the
ruminating,
of the commentary,
yeah.
the ongoing commentary. So how does one sit in that empty space with that sense of insecurity?
Why do you think it's insecurity?
There's a sense of uncertainty, of maybe, I don't want to say instability, because it's not instability as we use the term when we speak about meditation, but there is an emptiness, like something is, like the mind is looking for something, for the crutch, because basically the commentary is a crutch. So now, without the crutch, there's that, like a toddler trying to walk. So how does one deal with that when practicing?
Well, you're just present with whatever arises and not wanting it to go or getting attached, Mm-hmm. So you become aware that there's some kind of maybe insecurity, or maybe it doesn't have a name, maybe it's an unpleasant feeling. But for some people, that silence of the mind is experienced as great peace. Finally, that crazy voice that never stops and is always giving that commentary and judging, criticizing, telling us what to do, what not to do, what we did right, what we not, it's always thinking, commenting. Suddenly it shuts up and it's silence, peace, right? So for some people, that's a very enjoyable experience. For others, it can be, as you say, a little bit scary, or some insecurity, or something unknown, because we're so habituated to have that commentary or that chit-chat, internal dialogue, right, in our minds. So there's other experiences that can arise, and these are qualities of the substrate consciousness. So it's non-conceptuality or silence, this spaciousness is one. Then there is clarity. It can arise a lot of vividness in the mind, sharpness, being very awake, lucid, vivid. And that, some people get attached to that experience and experience like, I don't like the silence, but I like the vividness. And then there is a third quality that is bliss and can be experienced as a joyful experience, both in your body or your mind or both, right? It's just feeling so good. And then there can be a combination. Two of these might arise more strongly, or the three of them. But as long as we are in this duality of subject and object, we have that preference. I prefer this over this, or I don't like. So in order to go deeper into meditation, we have to release even those attachments and not prefer one over the other, And just know that when the mind settles, there is non-conceptuality, clarity, and bliss. And these three, we're looking for them all the time. In everything we do, in every activity. Some of us are looking more for the silence, and we get disturbed by the sounds. We want to be in nature or in a peaceful place, or even go to a spa or a resort where we can have that feeling of peace or silence. And then there's others that are looking for the experience of vividness through strong experiences that activate that sense of being awake here. And then there's people that just want to experience bliss and bring me all the bliss, all the pleasures of the senses. We're attached to all kinds of things that give rise to these experiences, but they arise for very short time. And then the discomfort arises, the guilt, I should be doing something else, or this is not satisfying enough. The food I used to like this restaurant, I don't like it anymore. Like all this commentary again that don't let us stay still, right? So any of these experiences, as they are balancing, can give rise to also a sense of fear of the unknown, because we're familiar with certain mode of operating that is very conceptual. So just notice that is there, that insecurity, and don't fear anything. It's your mind that is settling and is coming to find those moments of silence will become more frequent, and you will become more used to them, and you will start enjoying them and liking them, because you will see the contrast with that crazy voice, right? But the thing is, if we sit to meditate, we don't prefer one thing over the other. We're just present with whatever is arising. So if the mind is very, very conceptual and the commentary is like that waterfall of non-stop, you're like, I wish that voice shuts up. Not even preferring that. You notice it's there. But that's why we have the methods of coming back to the breath or taking that commentary as the object in the space of the mind and observing it. So either way, in the process, our minds are going to give rise to a lot of experiences. And some of them are going to be pleasant, and some are going to be unpleasant, and some are going to be neutral. But we have to deal with allowing this to arise and pass, as everything else, okay? Not grasp, not reject. Sometimes the spaciousness or the silence can give rise to a little bit of fear, because we start having that intuition, that insight, that there's not a solid I there to hold on to, and that can be a little bit threatening. But if you say, this is going to finally liberate me, and you trust and you understand the teachings, then you will let go. And that's the fear, to let go, But little by little, and we practice. And when we do shamatha, actually, we are cultivating patience too, because when we're practicing in retreat or in our house, in meditation, at that time, if we learn to focus on our breath or in any of the shamatha practices, that time, there's no need to give rise to anger. Nobody is fighting us. There's very little that can give rise to anger. Of course, there can be a thought suddenly that detonates the anger, but you're practicing, so you let go of the thought and bring back your attention to the breath. So by practicing shamatha, you are also not engaging and looking for experiences that give rise to anger, because sometimes we just go out and engage with people just because we are bored or we need some stimulation, and we go and provoke others and give rise to that anger in ourselves or in others. So by practicing in meditation, you are also helping and contributing to the world and helping yourself to find that equanimity and that calm, peaceful mind, because you have less cravings and less need to get or to prove anything. You're happy there in your meditation cushion or hut or cabin or wherever you are. So if you experience silence, like peace, clarity, no conceptuality, bliss, happy, why would you like to go and fight, right? So we're cultivating that equanimity also. Anything else? Yes?
I have 3 questions actually. The first one is regarding the patient. At least in my experience, what it has been is, most of the time, I tend to be patient. So what my experience has been that these things you tend to bottle things up, and then when you are in a vulnerable state, even
in a what?
vulnerable state.
Yeah.
Mentally, even the slightest provocation, maybe it's not a big thing, all of that pent up thing comes out and you burst. That's the first thing. So how do you deal with that? So that's my question regarding patience, because I feel if you do that, you tend to bottle things up and eventually it will burst. So.
Yeah, that's the danger, to repress or bottle things, as you say, the emotion, and not talking in the moment. Like if something is you see that there's a problem that you need to address and discuss with someone, it's better to do it when you're calm, but address it and use there's different methods like nonviolent communication and other strategies where you can try to communicate what you're experiencing without harming others, but also you don't know the reaction of others. So we fear what's going to happen, and then sometimes we just bottle it, as you say, or repress it because we don't want to face it.
Or you don't want to offend another person.
Yeah, but then if we don't solve it, then we're just postponing it, and then it starts accumulating a lot of things, and then we explode out of control. Or it's just, when it's detonated, we bring things from the past that we haven't solved, and this happens a lot with our relatives because we have a long story. So we start saying, yeah, in 1963, you threw the plate of food I served you, you threw it, and you did this, and I can't forgive you for that. But didn't we discuss it back then, and we thought it was solved? Yeah, but you always do this, and you bring it back. You start bringing things that we think they were solved, but no, they're still pulling your energy. You still have a lot of energy connected to those events. So by doing the meditations of remembering those events, seeing what went wrong, how did you act, how the other person acted, trying to liberate and forgive them and forgive yourself, by doing those meditations, when you are detonated in an emotional episode, you're not going to start bringing all the things from the past because you already moved on from them. That's one thing. And then remembering, in this moment, I'm only able to access memories or connecting events that trigger more anger. So I should take a pause and calm down before I discuss this and try to find a solution, right? Because if we don't do that, when we are in the middle of the episode, of the emotional episode, that's called refractory period. And that refractory period, depending on the circumstance and the intensity, is the time we are, our mind is completely permeated by that emotion. So everything we're perceiving through the filter of anger. And it can last a few hours, days, weeks. Every one of us has different times to process that refractory period. Sometimes there's people that have very short refractory periods, so they get a big explosion, very angry, and then 5 minutes later they are like, it passed, they're okay. But the other people are still in the refractory period. No, I'm not okay yet, right? I'm still angry. But these people have a very short and explosive. Then there's others that they don't explode as big with the anger, but the refractory period can last weeks, and they are in a state of resentment, and they can't speak, they can't see you, they can't interact with you because the anger is still there, and they're kind of repressing it or keeping it there, right? So we have to learn to work with how it manifests in our minds and our reactions. Some of us are more explosive, some of us are more towards kind of containing it, but we have to work with that anger and not just keep it there repressed and not work with it, because then, as you say, come back in the future and we haven't solved problems that we had 20, 30 years ago, right? They're still there. So, of course, some things might need therapy and a lot of process to heal, because there were big events that marked our lives. So it's not easy. But we have to know ourselves, know our story, and know what energy we have still connected to those events.
And the second follow-up question was regarding the same thing. Many times, you don't explode, you don't erupt, but you bottle it up, and then you feel bitter and angry at yourself because for having suffered the indignity. Mm-hmm. So that's the second question. How do you deal with that? How do you even maybe you don't get angry at others, but you bottle it up and you feel bitter at yourself for the indignity that you suffered, or your ego suffered, whatever. And third thing is, I've heard it in the yogic system that if you can sustain your anger for an extended period of time, that could also lead to enlightenment. I've just heard this, I don't know.
Yeah, so it's true we can get angry with ourselves, and we need to address that anger, being patient with our process of transforming that anger. We can apply an antidote, like meditating on the causes of anger and why it's not beneficial, meditating on impermanence, on the main topics of karma, and all these things can help us that anger decreases because we're developing wisdom and understanding, right? We can also see the anger, do vipashyana with the anger and see, oh, there's the anger, where is it? Is it big? Is it small? Is it has color? Where do I feel it? In my chest? In my head? Where is it? The more you look, the less you find it. You realize it's empty. And other is just be present, accepting there's anger right now. I'm not going to push it away. I'm not going to grasp to it and feed it with more thoughts. Let it liberate by itself. Just being present. Now, in the Buddhist tradition, there's every mental affliction has a counterpart of wisdom, of the 5 wisdoms that are arising but being distorted. So in anger there is the element of vividness or clarity. In attachment there is the element of bliss. So when anger arises, if you canalize that energy of vividness, clarity of the mind, you feel very awake. Instead of using it to destroy, use it to create something. write or paint or do exercise or do something constructive with that energy and be fully present, or do a shamatha meditation or any meditation, increasing that vividness. And if you recognize the wisdom aspect there, of course it can help cultivate the seeds to enlightenment, because you're transforming that affliction into its opposite, which is that wisdom, right? From non-duality aspect is arising from the same primordial wise consciousness. So, yeah, more to reflect on that. But for now, let's keep practicing patience right here, right now, and dedicated always for the benefit of us and others. Okay?